one of the biggest stories in the NFL the last couple of weeks has been how surprisingly good the Bears have been. If you look, the Bears obviously at the start of the year, not great in terms. I mean, I think I still have an unpaid debt that gets even scarier. That the I've really just dug myself an even further hole by having not jumped in the ocean yet because it's now January. So for all of you that are upset that
Yeah, that's
I haven't
right.
done that, um, for all of you
Holy
that are upset
shit,
that I
I'd
haven't done
forgotten
that,
about that.
it's gonna happen. Um,
Oh my
I think I've
god.
honestly just made it worse for myself,
I think
frankly.
so.
So,
Holy smokes.
so
I wasn't
that's
even thinking about
that's
that.
okay.
I made like a whole
That's
graphic
okay.
for that. Like our network posted it. Like that's how did nobody mention that? Like how did we all just collect? You could have totally gotten away with it scot free if you hadn't brought it up right now. Because I had
I could have.
completely forgotten about that. That is so awesome. Thank you.
I could have. I am a man. I am a man of my word, and I'm gonna do it. Like I just need to find the right time. And obviously at this
I'm
point, the
making this a
right time
segment
is just
now.
gonna be very
I need to
cold.
remind the people.
Okay, yeah, that I still need to jump in the ocean. I'm going
Yeah.
to. I'm going to. You know what?
Is it
You
even
know what?
safe to jump in the
It will be.
ocean in January? Like, I guess in Vancouver it's not the
Well,
same as.
if I come back on the podcast at this point, then like if there's a Simon solo podcast next week, then you know how that went.
I'll just be having a
My
podcast
body's
with a
floating into the
popsicle.
Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a segment. We have a segment to do. We don't need to talk
Anyways,
about the
we did have a segment.
logistics.
The point about me bringing up the me jumping in the river was because at that point in the season, I thought the Bears were so bad that there wasn't any possible way they could beat the Commanders, which at this point of the year seems very silly of me to have said because the Commanders are dumpster fire. Um, but the Bears since maybe not since then, but for the last few weeks have been pretty darn good. They've pulled off some wins against a lot of them have been cupcakes. You've got games against the Cardinals. You've got your classic kind of bottom dwellers that they've fed on, but they've also beat up teams that are close to being in the playoffs. You've got they beat the Falcons, they beat the Lions, they beat the Vikings, narrowly lost to the Browns. Like those are all great wins, all orchestrated by that man on the screen right now, Justin Fields. Which brings up the big dilemma because the Bears just clinched the number one overall pick because of Carolina's loss. And with that comes the question: what do the Bears do? Do they stick with Justin Fields, trade out of that number one spot, potentially get an even bigger haul than they did last year, with basically essentially trading away the rights for Caleb Williams, who was one of the best QB prospects we've seen since Trevor Lawrence? Or do they trade Justin Fields, try to get something for him now, and then start over with a guy like Caleb Williams or even Drake May as your number one quarterback? I'll leave that up to you, Simon. If you were Ryan Poles, Bears GM right now, what are you doing?
Well, Justin Fields' whole career so far has felt very up and down, and I think if you're asking what I would do in his shoes, I think it just depends on how sold you are on Caleb Williams. I think there's been a lot of conversation, especially this year, about whether he's even the best quarterback in the draft. I've seen that argument brought up once. Whether how legit of an argument that is at this point, that's up to you. It's no secret he's been a little bit more disappointing than a lot of people were expecting, and I don't know. But you could make the same argument for Justin Fields so far in his career. Like, there's been a lot of points where everybody thinks he's going to become that elite quarterback that we even had him pegged to become at the beginning of the year, and he just doesn't do it, right? Like, it's just that type of, I don't know, right? Like, they have a situation where I'd almost argue the Bears are in the perfect situation where they can right now choose to move on from Justin Fields, who has not been incredible. He's been okay, but he hasn't been anything that necessarily screams at you franchise quarterback. So I think it just depends on how sold you are on Justin Fields and how sold you are on Caleb Williams. I think if you're looking at what people have been saying about Caleb Williams almost his entire collegiate career, I think you have to trade Fields, right? That makes more sense. But after this season, I think it's just about how, like I said, I keep hitting on it. How high are you on Caleb Williams, and is that enough for you to trade your current franchise quarterback?
Yeah, and I think that is a good place to start because I do think that's probably what's going on in the mind of Ryan Poles right now. Because it really is, you have to weigh. First of all, you have to weigh Caleb Williams versus Justin Fields. Second of all, you have to weigh Caleb Williams will be coming in as a rookie, and Justin Fields has already had 3 years to get acclimatized to the NFL and get better, which he has. So there's that part of it too. That is obviously something you have to take into consideration. But if I am the Bears GM right now, I also want to think about the return that I can get. Because this Bryce Young trade that the Panthers made, I think has rejuvenated that Bears organization. You get DJ Moore, and you get the first overall pick. So you're right, in terms of it is a win-win. Because either way, they're going to be getting something fantastic out of a trade for a quarterback that it's too early to call him a bust, but has not looked great in that Carolina offense. So, if the question is, what would I do? I am firmly on the side of you keep Justin Fields for a couple reasons. I think, first of all, this is not a knock against Caleb Williams. Like, I do think it's a fair point in term that you make in terms of evaluating Caleb Williams in terms of how good you think he actually is. I think he's fantastic. I think he is by far the best quarterback in the draft.
Do you think he's the best Caleb to ever throw a football?
Well, that's something that can be debated. I like to stick up for myself a little bit. Frankly, if I had,
you're saying if you had his line and receivers.
Yeah, exactly. If I had the scholarship, like frankly, I don't know. If I was in the States where they could have discovered my talent,
I was gonna say unknown Albertan talent.
Exactly.
God, straight out of the backyard football league.
Yeah, like, come on. The name Peterson would be emblazoned on the back of a Bears jersey right now. They'd already be selling it in the shops. But he's a pretty good substitute for what we can get. He's a decent. True. Caleb represent. At least he spells it right. If he spelled it with a K, he would be my worst enemy, and I'd hope he goes undrafted. But he spells it with a C, so he's cool, and I'm okay with it.
That has to be a European
with him being
thing.
the #1 pick.
The Caleb with a K.
Spelling it with a K. I don't even know. People who have Caleb with a K are weird. If you are Caleb with a K, stop watching the podcast. We don't want you here.
Okay, buddy.
I'm just kidding.
Let's calm the Jets a little bit.
I'm just kidding. Caleb's with a K. You're welcome here. I just hold a little bit of a grudge. Anyways, that's not the topic at hand. I do think you keep Justin Fields, and I don't think it's not because I don't like Caleb Williams as a prospect. I think he's fantastic. However, I think everybody knows that he's fantastic, and I think the haul that you can get for that #1 pick is going to be something unlike we've ever seen. Because for these top draft picks, you have to overpay, right? We saw it last year with Carolina. Carolina gave up their first-round pick because the Bears just moved down to pick 9, right? They only drop 8 spots, but they also get DJ Moore, a bona fide #1 wide receiver, and their first-round pick next year, which turned into #1. And that is for Bryce Young, who is a worse prospect than Caleb Williams is. Can you imagine what you're going to get for Caleb Williams?
Yeah,
that
is
kind
really
of
the
haul
conversation.
is going to be astronomical. And I don't think, because we haven't really reached draft season hype yet, because these guys, like Caleb Williams, is going to be talked up significantly more once we don't have actual football to watch. People are going to start watching the tape and realize, if they don't already, which they do, how fantastic he is. Because he is the kind of like Trevor Lawrence generational prospect that we've seen. Bryce Young simply isn't on the same level. I think just because of that haul you can get for Caleb Williams and how you can continue to kind of push that draft pick into the future. Like, imagine if you give that draft pick up. Like, I think here's the ideal situation. You trade down to 3 with the Patriots, get their first-round pick next year, maybe throw in another player.
Caleb, you're breaking my heart.
Then...
You can't give the Pats Caleb Williams. They can't keep getting away with it.
Simon, I don't think you know how realistic it is that's probably what's
Oh,
gonna
I'm
happen.
sure. There's been talks about that for 2 years, buddy.
Yep.
like, uh,
Uh, as I mean, even if you look at how the draft is kind of playing out, because you got Bears, because the Bears are the reason I say they want to trade down to 3 is because I don't think you want to miss out on Marvin Harrison. That's the one receiver that I think you really have to
yeah,
get to pair with Fields if you want to build around him. So you've got that. I think if you trade down any further past 3, you're not going to get Marvin Harrison. I think that's the thing. But even then, getting a guy like Marvin Harrison at 3, a first round pick next year, and then maybe another couple picks and another player, another fantastic haul. And the Patriots will still, probably because of how atrocious that team is, other than their defense, will probably still be a top 5 pick next year. Then the Bears are just like, that's so much better than trying to draft Caleb Williams and use that pick now. Even if he does become the superstar that he probably will be, Justin Fields, I think, is on that cusp right now. Um, so I think that's probably the best move for your team, and I think that's probably what they'll do.
yeah. Well, and at the very least, if he does go to the Patriots, Bill Belichick won't be there. Like, I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
little bit better. Like, God, that's really interesting though. That's a very good point. Like, I'm curious on how accurate that is to how the Bears feel in their own facilities. Like, how sold do you think they actually are on Justin Fields? Like, because there has to be the conversation that they've been getting is that they're looking to get a second or a third round pick, or at least that's what the market is for Justin Fields. I wonder, like, how how much do you think that's got to weigh into this decision too? Like, what can you actually get for Fields, right? Like, do you want to give up a guy like Fields when you're only going to get a second round pick out of it, and when you can get a lot
No.
more for trading away that Caleb Williams pick? Like, how much does that come into effect in this conversation?
Yeah, because I think if you're the Bears and you're playing it smart, you want to play the odds. So if you just look at it in terms of straight up what you're going to get, the one route you get Caleb Williams and let's say at best a second round pick. Okay, Caleb Williams will probably be fantastic, but he could also flame out. Any quarterback can. Versus, you keep Justin Fields, who I think has more value than a second round pick. You keep Justin Fields, you draft, and you essentially just give yourself more cracks at the can, right?
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison, all these draft picks can flame out, right? But Marvin Harrison is a pretty sure thing. That even if he doesn't work out, then you have your next year's first round pick that you've now gotten in this trade. Like it just kind of pushes things further down the road in terms of um, we want to have the most shots that we can to get blue chip players. And I think Justin Fields is a blue chip player. And I think Caleb Williams has higher potential than he is. Caleb Williams is a better prospect than Justin Fields ever was. But you can't say that Justin Fields isn't playing at a level where he has that superstar potential in him. Because there's just 1 or 2 or 3 things that he does every game that make you just say this guy's special. And there's some things that need to be worked out. He holds onto the ball too long, all that. But all of that can be worked out with better supporting cast, with just training in that over the offseason. He's gotten better each year he's played. And so if I'm looking at the Bears and I'm looking at that return, like you said, like a second round pick, I'm weighing my options, and that's why I eventually go with Justin Fields. But to your point, we don't know what kind of evaluation they have in your room. Maybe
like
they
you
don't.
said, he's been
Maybe they don't
special
see him
at
as a
times.
superstar.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, but you gotta wonder if, like you said, at times he's really shining. You gotta think in the back of their heads, like, what if we draft this Caleb Williams guy, and he sucks? Like, obviously, he looks like a sure thing of a prospect, but that's been said before. Like, what if you draft Caleb Williams and he's just bad? He doesn't translate to the NFL, and then you trade Fields to, let's say in this scenario, he goes to the Patriots, right? Let's just like throw out a team like that.
Or he goes to the Seahawks.
Or he goes to the Seahawks, right? Like, let's say he goes somewhere like that, and he just excels. Like, and he just like turns into that quarterback that the Bears were thinking that he would be when they drafted him. And all of a sudden, the Bears look stupid as hell, like, and just caught going like, well, now our quarterback is this Caleb Williams guy who suddenly forgot how to throw a football. Like, you got to wonder if maybe that's the conversation in that room. Like, you got to weigh the risks and rewards. Do you really think Caleb Williams is going to be this generational talent, and do you really think Justin Fields is going to pan out? Because if you think Caleb Williams is the next Patrick Mahomes, and you don't think that Fields is that guy, or at least he's not going to be as good, trade away Fields, right? But it's just, I think it totally just comes down to what your expectations for Williams are at that next level. Do you really think that he can be the thing that takes over the NFL for the next 10 years, 20 years?
Yep. And yeah, I mean, if you're the Bears, because you make a great point, because like painting that scenario of trading Fields somewhere else and he's fantastic and Williams sucks, that's a real possibility.
Yeah.
Especially for the Bears.
Think about it like this. You pointed out Bryce Young. Like, a lot of people thought that he would be the most, like, or at the very least, out of all these rookie quarterbacks that came in and started this year, he would be the one with the best chance to succeed at that next level. And so far, it's almost been the opposite.
Yep.
Almost every single rookie
he was
who
the most
started
pro-ready.
Yeah, exactly. But, like, almost every single other rookie, when they've been on the field, has outplayed him. And I think that totally just shows the risks here, and why I almost, after having this conversation, I'm almost leaning towards where you are. Like, maybe you don't want to take that risk.
Yeah. But the Bears have to be Bears fans. Honestly, like you said, it's a win-win. It's only good things. Like, it's a very great situation to be in and a great way to reboot a franchise. But if you're Bears fans with the history of quarterbacks that they have, you have to be scared shitless. I saw an Instagram comment on some sort of random post about this the other day that I think summed it up pretty much perfectly. And there's really no right decisions, but you can be sure that the Bears will make the wrong one. And like for Bears fans, that has to be terrifying, right? Because you can just so easily see that happening, where either they trade away the Caleb Williams pick and he becomes the next second coming of Mahomes, and the Bears are just like left wondering what if again. Because I believe it was the Trubisky draft that Mahomes was in.
Yes.
Where they passed up on Mahomes to get Trubisky.
You're right on that.
So they could be left with that situation again, which would just be heartbreaking. Or you can trade away Fields, who you already had in the building for 3 years, and he becomes the next superstar quarterback. It's just it's a good conundrum, but it's still a conundrum. Which is it's
the same thing that we see in the NHL all the time with the goalie conversation, right? Where like Boston's had it for the last 2 years, they've managed to juggle it, but that's going to come to head soon between Swayman and Allmark. It's just one of those things where you got two guys who are both very, very good and good enough to be that top guy, but you don't want to get rid of one, right?
Yep, because you can only have one on the ice or on the field at the same time, right?
Yeah, I almost wonder if it's smarter if you're the Bears to just wait and draft Williams, and then once you have both in your training camp or both in the system, you can just decide at that point. Like, that's just me spitballing. I don't know if that would actually be smarter.
Yeah,
but
I did have that same thought, and it would be interesting, but I do think that takes away some of the because I did have that same thought. And I was kind of playing through that in my head. But I think the one issue with doing that is you kind of tank his Williams' trade value. The most you're going to get out of Caleb Williams is if you trade him before he's even drafted. Because let's say you bring him into your room and you think, oh, Fields is looking great. Williams isn't looking as good. Let's trade him. What message does that send to other teams? Right? We don't want this guy anymore.
Yeah, I guess.
We've seen him in a room and he's not great. How many teams are going to want to pay the same ransom that they would have otherwise paid for him? That's the conundrum. That's the conundrum.
And I think it just, like, there's so many options here. The Bears are totally just put in such a bad spot that I'm really interested to see where they're going to end up going with it, I guess. We're just going to have to see.
Yep. It's a good conundrum to have, but it's still a conundrum.
Yeah.
Of course, like, the Bears are probably going to make the wrong move. And whatever happens, either way, they're probably going to make the wrong decision. But for those fans, I hope not.
Yeah. And for the next segment. We're going to continue with the football. This is a football heavy podcast. Who could have saw that one coming from us? That's a big shocker. We got NCAA coming up next.